me to take pictures?
Sure.
So good morning, everybody. I wanted to, first of all, welcome everyone to take your time out of your busy real estate day. I know how much important that is. I'm personally a recovering realtor myself. My name is Chris Baker. I am a former RE/MAX broker. I brought up in the business since 1974. My mom was a real estate broker, and I just followed her around, so I kind of like know the business backwards and forwards. I have now transitioned into the title aspect of the business, so I'm still intimately aware of how this world works. I've had the privilege of knowing and working with some of you in this room. I had the opportunity to befriend and get to work with Steve over the last year, and we've just had an amazing opportunity in terms of value that we're able to derive from each other, from what he's teaching, from what I'm teaching. Without getting into too much detail, I had the chance to meet Steve through one of my presentations on how to use and implement AI into your real estate business, and it's been my forte to get my foot in the door as a title agent that will maybe step aside and be a little bit different than the rest. So in the last year, I've had the privilege and honor of meeting Steve in person, and it's truly an honor because watching this man's reputation and his ability to convey great information. As a former agent, the hardest thing that I had to learn was how to price properties, comp properties, because it wasn't really taught to me. So today you're going to walk away with a framework, a system on how to do that, and you guys are at the baseline beta class of what Steve's going to eventually turn into a mega product that I think a lot of people are going to benefit from, and you are at the ground level. So I just wanted to say, again, thank you for your time. You guys are truly in for a treat. You are in the presence of greatness, as I used to say. One of the nicest, most humblest persons I know. I'd like you guys to have the opportunity to welcome Steve McAdams.
Yeah.
Congratulations, brother.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. Good morning.
Good morning.
Come on. How are you guys feeling today?
Good.
Come on, we can do better than that. How are we feeling today? Yeah. Well, I am so excited, and I'm also very honored to be with you here today and you taking your time to come and join in. I'm excited because every day, not every day, but probably every week for the last 30 years, we get a call to the office, either investors or agents that are in great need or great pain. Some investors have invested in properties, rehabbed them, and they realize they're upside down and they don't know what to do. The properties can't sell. And then we also have agents who maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a big business associate that they've worked so hard to get that lead. And then they got that lead and they were super nice to the agent or to the seller or to the investor coming in, and they find the deal slipping away from them. That the whole thing and the whole problem usually starts with price or condition. And so by taking that and learning all that and helping people, I thought, hey, how about if I put together the frameworks? And the frameworks basically are very simple. And today, it's my big promise to you that by the time you leave here, you're going to know exactly the frameworks to take and the steps to take on any property. You're going to learn how to put your emotions and personal beliefs aside, and you're going to be able to step into a system that the banks use across the country, same everywhere you go, so that when you go and meet with somebody or you get that lead intake, you're going to be able to process that so quickly. You're going to know whether it's a good lead or not, and you're going to be able to get out there and get in front of the seller with the goal of today is get you into authority, so that when you're in your authority and you're in your power, you perform at a different level. Has anybody ever gone to a listing appointment where they've kind of not 100% sure of what the value should be? And what does that do for your authority when you're sitting across from the seller? Can they sense that? And what does that do for setting the terms of the deal as you go forward? Does that make it more or less difficult? Yeah. So today, what you're about to discover is you're going to discover how to not only intake a property, but intaking the property and understanding what it is You then also have to decide what's the highest and best use. Is it a retail buyer? Is it an Airbnb? Is it short-term rentals around a college? Is it an investor where the rental rates are jumping through the roof? And so knowing the best exit strategy also then compiles to what's the best financing program. You see, one of the things that you'll learn, and one of the things that will give some people a lot of heartache, is when you bring a deal in and you get a contract in, the condition of the property or the structure of the property may not comply with the lender's terms. And so there's nothing worse than getting along. You know, when you intake the lead, you build the rapport, you get the listing, people come in, you accept the contract, and next thing, the financing that they're taking is coming up with all these conditions on your property. And then if you have a lot of conditions, what's that do with the seller? Does it make them happy or does it get them upset? Yeah, it gets them really upset. So the goal of today is to be able to give you a big picture of the back end. And this program is for people where you're dealing with properties that are the funding mechanism is going to be a mortgage. If you have a cash buyer, that can be a completely different scenario. However, if you have a cash buyer that's buying and rehabbing a property, and the exit strategy most likely is going to be someone that's getting funding, it will do you good to know what the funding is on the end so that you can move this investor in and out of their deal. Does that make sense? Okay, good. When I was an agent, and I started out right out of high school pretty much, and my first couple years were really tough. My first year I made $1,400 and I worked all the time for the whole year. And finally it got to a point where, I was young, 21, I was very green, and finally got to the point where my family and friends started referring me business. And I can remember my first deal, very popular person, had a big sphere of influence. He was the first one that was going to own a property. So I worked with him on buying a property. And in the project that I was in, there was a mixture, it was townhomes, and there was a different mixture of styles and builders. So the one that we were looking at was a Ryan home, which at the time in that project, Ryan was what? They were the entry-level builder. Then when you had the other builders that were building bigger ones, same bedroom, bath count, but they were bigger in square footage. So when we wrote a contract and they were getting ready to move and, 45 days into the deal, back then it used to take 45 or 60 days to settle a deal. And we got a call, hey, the appraisal came in low. And I was like, what? And this guy was a CPA, and everything he did, I had to sit down with him and his dad 20 times. We slid the closing cost paper back and forth. Are you sure that's right? Yeah. So having to call somebody and say that the value was off, because I was pricing the property and we wrote the contract as if it was the bigger model. Same bedroom, same bath count, fireplace, deck, everything else. But the difference for us is this was a 1,200 square foot home, and this one was a 1,800 square foot home. And so by learning and understanding and studying, I got to learn the basics and the different frameworks as far as what you need to do. And whether you're working with a buyer or you're working with the seller, this is going to be able to put you in a position where you can manage and control your deals. Does that make sense? Okay, good. Today is our beta class. And so if you ask me what that means that I'm the type of person that learns, I learned through a biblical class I was in not too long ago that there's be, do, and have. So I'm the type of person that, in school, they used to, I was always taught to study something, master it, and then take a test, and then you move forward. I don't do well in that way, so what I do well better with is if I learn a little bit, I have an idea, and then I go try it. And so today, everybody that is here, and I want to thank you. You were invited because you guys are all some of the most professional individuals and realtors that I've worked with. And every one of you, I believe, looks for a level of mastery where you really look out for your clients. And so by working with you and sharing with you, I wanted to try and create a safe space where it's okay. Any question you want to ask on the process, please feel free to do so. No question is not a good question. And as we go through this process, I'll be getting your feedback and back and forth so that I can know how to communicate in your language. Sometimes when you do something long enough, and when we talk all day long with underwriters and everybody else, our level of technicality is going to be much deeper than, per se, what people who don't do it every day. So the language and the communication is key so that I can be able to communicate and be able to help you step to the next level in your business, creating your voice and creating your brand and authority out there. Now, with that being said, what I would like to do, if it's okay with everybody, is just go around the room and introduce, let us know where you do business and what you are, and if you can either state what your number one problem or what your number one goal of today, what your big takeaway would be in order for this to be considered a success for you, would be greatly appreciated. So we'll go around this way if that's okay. And I'm going to just take a couple notes on what you said.
I guess I'll start with sitting over here. So thanks, Steve. My name is Ray McCree. Been in the industry for 3.5 years. I have a background in higher education administration for 30 years at institutions in Maryland, and decided to go to real estate because my family has been investors for 35 years. So that had sort of pulled me in a little bit, but then it was my passion to go ahead and go into the industry and sort of going pretty well. The confidence that I wanted, the goal that I'm here to do is the listing. I'm starting to do more listing on the listing side, so I want to build confidence in myself as far as how I go about strategies for learning how to sort of list the price of the house appropriately. So looking forward to building my confidence even more based on what I've already been taught.
My name is Jessica Welder. I'm with Keller Williams. I've been an agent almost 14 years, and I guess my goal is I have faced, which Steve has helped me tremendously in the past couple months, I've faced some really unique properties that are very difficult to appraise. They are considered to be, what do they call them, unicorns, so I want to be able to identify them a little bit more and feel more confident in pricing properties that are very unique and nothing else is like them.
So we say confidence?
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And the difficulty in doing your business would be unique properties.
Correct.
Okay.
Carmen Johnson, also in Keller Williams flagship. I've been in real estate for 20 years, and if I ever get an opportunity to interact with an appraiser, I take it, because the more, I think that's the hardest part of our job, and the more we know about how to price houses or find the value is important. For me, it's like adjustments.
Adjustments,
When
okay.
you're doing a CMA, for a client, is trying to figure out how to make adjustments.
Okay.
I'm actually working on one right now too, where it's a tear down and the value's in the land and how to make that,
Okay.
like compensate for that.
Okay. Excellent.
My name is Brenda White. I'm with the Parthenon Group of Remax Fund. I've been a realtor for 22 years, or 21 years, and prior to that, I was in the settlement business. So this is what I know and love, the real estate world. As far as goals, I want to have more listings in the future. Of course, that's mostly what I do, but I've had some health issues, so I really want to get in these last few years before retirement, really go hard with business. The adjustments would be a problem for me. That's a big one, our adjustments. I had a great appraiser once teach me how to do numbers, but definitely I'm excited about this class, so he can teach me more of what
All
I
right.
need to know.
That's good. Thank you. And just so you know, all my troubles in my life started because of Brenda. We went to high school together. And she did me wrong. And she introduced me to drinking and Springsteen and the Voo down in College Park. Yep.
Oh, I
Yeah.
got stories. We'll save them for
Yeah.
later.
I'm Kristen Willits, also on the Hearth and Home Group of Remax One. I've been a realtor for 6 years. Previous educator, not as long, but probably 8 years. And then I met Brenda, and she kind of pulled me away from the education side, but love it. I would say my biggest thing is, I do a lot of CMAs in neighborhoods, and it's kind of easy to run comps, but my biggest thing would be, when we start to go to those more unique properties where I can't find the comps that support the property, and I'm trying to use learning strategies for how to price out those unique properties, but that would probably be my biggest.
Okay. Denise. And that is the second biggest troublemaker from right there. Yeah. She's high. She's college and beyond. No. Yeah. Well, now wait a minute. I got one more.
These title girls seem to be the troublemakers. Okay, so started out in land use and zoning, and then went to title, and I've been a realtor since 16 or 17. I don't even remember that year, but one of those two. Obviously kind of taken everything that you all have said, and then even so far as where we all think we're pros at comps like, cookie cutter in a subdivision, but when you're competing for the listing, to be able to more substantiate why I say your house is not worth more than $620 or whatever it is, to whether it's your pool, yes, but they're gonna give you a $25,000 adjustment for that, not 40. I wanna go down the line with all of these, because sometimes I'm not competing for the listing, but when I am, and you don't get it, and then you look at what
So would you-
listing it for you.
Would you say seller expectations?
Yeah, well, I can manage it, but I wanna
Right.
be able to substantiate more what I feel, based on what we're gonna learn more of today. So that they can, it's not sometimes what they wanna hear, but
Yeah. Okay.
it's the truth, but to substantiate that better.
And Diana, we know you deal with all cash, multi-million-dollar buyers, but no.
Hi, everyone. I'm Diana Carrasco with Keller Williams Metro Center. I've been a realtor for 8 years. My background is in marketing and broadcasting communication. So I have a radio show about real estate in Spanish. My niche is the Hispanic community. And I do a lot of education. I believe in social marketing, and that's been a key for my business. I'm here because obviously I work with Steve as well, and I think my pricing strategy is a little off lately. My goal would be to learn some strategies, but mostly to have that authority, just like Denise said, to be able to substantiate when, because one thing is seller rejections, but another thing is, this is the reason why. I know this is not what you want to hear. We know how to manage those things, but I want to use probably the technical words, the technicality, facts that I can say. I did the CMA, and a lot of realtors could tell you this and this about the pricing. But I went ahead and researched this, the authority. And this is why I'm sure this is the price, because we all know the sellers, they want to get the most out of the money, and sometimes we're having complacent and following a loan a little bit, at least I'm guilty of that. And then at the end, it backfired us because we raised the expectations, we overpromise, under-deliver, and then,
Just to
not
get
good.
them to sign.
Yes, just to get them to sign, and it's not fair.
And that's in this type of market, that's what you're going to see, and hopefully by the end of this, we'll give you a few strategies or principles that you can put into tactics in order to communicate to your seller.
Well, I am Katie Cook. I started with Remax Experience. I'm now with Douglas Realty. I used to manage mortgage and title way back when, while I was putting myself through school for my nursing career. I did manage pediatric trauma for 40 years, and then I semi-retired. I got a job at Remax Experience answering phones for 10 hours a week. 2 weeks later, they gave me the office, and the next year I made Remax Manager of the Year, which I'm very proud of. I've been a realtor for a little over 2 years, going into my 3rd year. I guess I would say my goal, I want to be a referral agent. I want the people that I work with to have enough confidence and respect for me and how I work and the reputation that I build, that I'm always working with somebody I know or somebody I know knows. I need, I really want my business to get to that level. And I know that's a really big goal, but I would love to be an agent that works strictly with referrals from previous clients. That's the end goal for my business model. Some of my biggest questions are how certain items, like in a condo, is it worth putting the granite countertops in, or should we just leave it where it is? Are we gonna get the return on investment? If the swimming pool is above ground, it takes up half the yard, how does that truly affect it? If there's no AC, but it's in the neighborhood where most of the houses don't have AC, but the new ones are being filled with the ACs, how do you compare? I mean, we always try to go apples to apples, but sometimes all we have are oranges. And that's the most difficult portion for me. And then how to relay my justification to the client. When I go in, I give them my CMA, and I want to be solid, and I want to be confident in that, and I generally am. But then when the questions start coming, you sit at the table and kind of grovel a little.
So would you say that a component of when you're getting ready to list a property, or if you have an investor that wants to renovate a property and they say, what should I do? Having some knowledge as to how to address that would be beneficial?
Absolutely, because,
Okay.
I'm looking into
Got it.
how much is the countertop, what it's gonna cost you to put into it, what am I gonna be able to get
Yeah.
you out of it? Where's your return on investment? Is it worth the investment of even doing it at all, or just giving them a little credit at the end to do it themselves?
Yeah, and that's really good. And as you look at building out your business, one of the things that I found, especially now that I'm on the back end, I'm on the back end where I get to see the lenders funding and the deals coming in. And every deal, regardless of what the financing type, it's always what's the value, and does it comply and meet local guidance, or is it, the other thing to worry about is it structurally sound and is it safe and secure? So on the back end of that, what I found is that the people in the investor world that do the wholesaling and the rehab and all that versus the agents and the retail buyers versus some of the Airbnb and some of the short-term rentals, they're all different worlds, but they're huge markets. And by understanding how to apply this, it's going to open up so many different worlds where you're going to be so confident that you're even going to be able to go and hire and train people up, and you'll have systems that you'll have if you choose to do that. Or you can go in any different market that you want. So excellent goal or problem to be able to solve. Mary?
Hi, I'm Mary Heisen. I'm a Coldwell Banker. I have been a realtor for 8, almost 9 years now. I originated in this industry. I've never done anything but. I originated in mortgage and then in title for 20 years and now in real estate. So I am here, I am primarily a listing agent, but I can't tell you that I haven't, lately, it's all right, I want to get top value for them. But when I walk into a listing appointment, and I'm typically referral, so I can't say it's easier, but I still need to deliver. I want to have so much knowledge in my head for that seller so that they are just completely at ease. I'm gonna get them top dollar, and this is why. Even to justify, in today's environment, justify commissions. You know, this is, I want to justify my own commission and what I charge and, have that discussion. So I know that kind of plays on value, so I'd like some interjection on that.
Absolutely.
And basically the same, it's like,
So,
how do you weigh it out?
Mary, so if you want to be able to present yourself in a manner where they don't question your commission, that's going to come down to your authority and your command, most likely, when you go into there. You're going to have some sellers that, regardless, they're just worried about that line, and that's okay. That's the way some people are. But the big key, and one of the biggest challenges for me when I was an agent, I would get busy. I'd get deals in, and I'd have a bunch of people. And then, because I didn't really have a good system, I was too involved with them emotionally and mentally. And then by the time we got to settlement, I felt like I was babysitting for 60 days. And then afterwards, I had to go take a vacation. And then guess what happened? And then guess what happened? I had to go back and I had to start the wheel all over again. And so here's the beauty of it. Once you have confidence and once we show you the overriding principles and the framework, you're gonna be able to keep everything in perspective, so you'll be able to detach from it personally.
Okay, so when I'm going in for a seller and I'm talking to them about buyer's agency commission, and I've got comps lined up, okay, your house will sell for this, and it's, the comps that I'm lining up, chances are that seller paid buyer commission. So that factor is in there, so is there any way, I guess I'm just looking for.
Yeah, so we'll absolutely go over that a little bit. And Patty, how are you doing?
Good. Patty Shunning, with Taylor Properties. I've been in real estate, will be going on 26 years. I used to also be on the property management side in sales for all your apartment complexes in Maryland, DC, and Virginia. I provided the background checks online for approving them or declining them and so forth for rentals. I think I think we're all kind of similar. It's those unique properties, and area-wise, my biggest struggle always ends up being Calvert County, because there's such the range of pricing. You don't have all these cookie cut. Yes, you do have some that are cookie cutter subdivisions, but there's so many properties that let's say like a split foyer that's on 5 acres, and then there's 5 others, and the price ranges from $350 to $650, and it's like, and some of them look the same, and you're like, what the heck do I do with this?
Yes, exactly.
That's it.
But,
and then there's only one photo.
So,
That's lovely.
and just an example is I lost my first listing, and it shocked me because I'm referral based, so I wasn't used to it. And what happened was, it was a Calvert County property. The lady was out of town. She says no rush, but I jumped on it and met with her daughter-in-law, looked at the property, waited for her to come back, and it was also, she wanted recommendations on fixing up. I also have a company called Updated Designs and Management. I work with a contractor that does all my work. So it takes some time to not just do a price, but also an estimate on regards to what it's going to cost to fix the property to get ready for sale. And they want it as is and as complete type price. So when I looked at this house, again, these adjustments in Calvert County killed me, because I just couldn't determine, the difference between this one and the highest one and the lowest one, and where do you fit in the middle. And when I come across it, I usually say, that's when I have you come in and do an appraisal. I make a recommendation, I show them. You're all over the place, and my goal is to get you the highest and best
By the way,
value.
thank you for all the referrals. Appreciate that. No,
And I recommend it. They reach out with Steve and get an appraisal, because we don't want to leave any money on the table.
Oh.
And I come in with that.
And by the way, a lot of times I just get the ones where the sellers are difficult, or it's really, I also do townhomes and condos, nice easy ones, in case you want to do those. I don't mind. Yeah, that's right. No problem at all there, you know.
But anyway, but if I didn't care, I could have come in and just thrown a price that I knew for sure, you know, like 500,000. But in reality, it could have been as high as almost 600,000. And I was honest with her. Well, she ended up going with the agent that said 500,000. And she said to
Oh,
me,
wow.
he could at least price the property. I was like, oh my God, you just probably left, you know,
And
almost $100,000 on the table. And I explained to her, and that's why I was recommending the appraisal. I didn't want to give her a price because, because of all these.
so would you say sometimes being too nice or accommodating can come back and get you?
Well, you know, my ex-husband always said, you're so honest, you'll lose business. And I felt like that was the first time that actually happened.
Okay.
You know, 500 grand, that was a guarantee would sell, but to me, my conscience was knowing that I was 90% sure I could get her at the minimum 565.
All right. Excellent. Now,
I'm Linda Felton. I'm also with Taylor Properties. I have been in the industry for longer than I care to say out loud. Very long time. I was in title as well for a long time. I've been an agent now probably about 10 years. I think my biggest goal would be, I want to be a valuable resource. I do a lot of investor-related or estate-related transactions. I want to be a valuable resource to them. Same thing as what Mary said, you know, if I put this in, what value will I get out of it? If I finish this basement, if I do all the things, I want to be able to give them that value. Also, I have called you a million times about just condition of properties, you know, or lack of a basement being finished, or is this pool gonna add, or, you know, my seller thinks this house is $1 million, but it's really $895, you know, so being able to be confident in explaining why I feel this way, because sometimes, as you know, sellers will just pick a number, and they don't have, there's nothing to back that number up.
Because their house is the best.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I wanna be able to say, well, that's, you know, that might be the number that you
would be
picked,
nice,
but
but-
Yeah.
this is where we're at, so.
Yeah. Well, these are all the exact same things that I faced 30 years ago when I was a realtor, and they're going to be the same things you face, you know, if you're doing the business 30 years from now. Everybody, you know, it's their asset. They're personally attached to it. They don't see the broader market like you do, and they have a higher utility because it's their property. You know, not everybody will look at it through the lens, in a higher scope lens that you will. So with today, so thank you everybody for that. And again, I just want to say thank you. As you can tell, everybody around this room has great in-depth insight into what goes on, and everybody here is a producer. So I just want to say how honored it is for me to have you here today. In addition to this being you know, the beta class, we were trying a couple things as well. I have no idea how to film something or live stream, so we're trying to figure this out on our own. A lot of people said, Steve, can you live stream this for us, or can you do it live? And I'm like, yeah, I would, but if I do that and the technology messes up, I'll just be too frazzled out. So we're taking little steps trying to figure it out. I want to introduce my son Connor in the back. He was here to help. In case if you didn't see him, he was going to be the greeter out there. So Connor was saying hi. Yep, say hi, Connor. Yeah, and Chris, we met Chris, and Caro. Thank you very much, Caro, for helping out with that. Everybody's here to help you if you have any questions. And we also have a guest, Joe. Joe runs exactly what we were talking about with real estate investors. He has a big club and financer. And Joe is doing a big retreat for his investors. So he's here to kind of see what I do and see if I'm going to go speak to his investors or not. So be good. Tell them I'll do good. No, I'm teasing. But Joe, would you mind saying a few words?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Joe Child. I'm Director and CEO of Press Go Management, a little company I started about 14 years ago. I've been in funding almost my whole career. most of you here who are realtors, you guys are my heroes because I was a realtor and a couple times. But you know, the board fees and the MRIS fees and the lockbox fees, and every time you turn around, you kind of, oh my God. I just kept returning to lending, and I think that's my place. So Presco Management does primarily private funding, private money, a lot of hard money, a lot of fix and flip kind of work, and tenant work, but all business use. I'm also NMLS licensed. I hang my license with a local broker in Rockville, but you know, my passion and my day job is the investor business, and a lot of what Steve hit on, you know, is what we do. Most of the properties that I deal with on the fix and flip, of course, are, you know, they're a wreck. The more distressed, the better. Urine is my friend. And I'm looking for a scope of work. How are you gonna make that property into the market rate of that neighborhood, and how much is it gonna cost? So heavy concentration on good contractors that know how to price out properties and bring those properties up to the market value. And in many ways, that gives you, you know, some freedom because, you know, you complain about sellers who have no idea what the value of their properties are. Well, it's even better if you're talking about this future value of a house that has not been created yet. Kind of like new construction, but it's not. So there's a lot of fun that goes into it. They finish the house, and the exit strategy is often selling it, so I need realtors that are interested in selling, you know, those properties once they're renovated. Sometimes they refinance the hard money into long-term hold, 30-year type loans for tenants, and that's what I do. The retreat that Steve mentioned, we're going up into the Pennsylvania mountains, get away from everybody here, spend the weekend talking about real estate. Hopefully Steve's going to be presenting, and we'll have some good speakers, and it's all inclusive, and if you're interested, just hit me up, I'll give you a card, and you know, we'd love to have you if you want to go. That's in September. It'll be the first time we've attempted something like this. So I like to watch Steve, see how he does these things, and he's presented and come to, I do a meetup once, a virtual meetup once a month, and I also do a lunch once a month at Lours, which has no presentation. It's just people like you guys coming to lunch, sitting around. There's, you know, sometimes 3, 4, there's sometimes 12, 14, having lunch at Lours talking about real estate. And that's produced some really cool relationships and you know, a lot of fun. So thanks for having me, Steve.
Yeah, thank you. So we got a good, you know, as you can see, we have a good mix, and this framework is going to apply no matter, you know, what position. If, you know, the issue that Joe will have, and I'll get sometimes, is you get somebody new in the market, or they're into a different market and they rehab something and then the market shifts, or they miscalculate it and now they've got all their money in the house and it won't sell, and they're panicking and freaking out, and they're paying these high payments with hard money loan coming up, and it just creates a lot of stress. So every side of real estate, even, you know, Airbnb or rental, everything comes back down to what's the value, and then what's the funding mechanism, and then what's the condition, you know, to kind of match it all into that. And you know, I always have a saying that if I'm going to hire somebody to work for me, say like if I'm going to go to the gym and I want to hire someone to train me, I'm going to want to work with somebody that can address my specific need. So before we get into what you're about to discover, is it okay if I just take 2 minutes and tell you about my history so you'll understand my story and what I'm bringing to you today? Is that okay? All right. So I started out pretty much out of high school. I went to the University of Maryland a couple years. I was playing football there as a walk-on, and pretty much was just a beaten up dummy that all the varsity players got to hit. And so I got into real estate. I didn't like school. I pretty much flunked out of the University of Maryland, and because I didn't like studying, I liked doing. So I got into real estate, and it was a big struggle at first. But eventually I got to the point where I found my legs. And at the time, the market was taking off. Everything was selling. Rates were coming down, everything was selling. So, back in those days, I was up in Laurel with Mount Vernon Realty. If you did $1 million or $2 million a year back then, you had your picture in the Laurel Leader. I had my picture in the Laurel Leader. I thought it was hot stuff, And it got to the point where I was at the point where I started getting into doing a few fix and flips and did a modular home, and then the market changed. And back then, or all through the years except for the last 5 years, whenever rates go up, the market and prices typically would go down. And so back then when the rates went up, I was very exposed. My listings weren't selling. The properties that I were renovating in the modular home weren't selling. I was carrying the payments. I was getting ready. I was married, and we were getting ready to trying to buy a house and get furniture and go on vacation. And so we had all these pressures on us. And eventually it all came to the point where it kind of blew up. And so, at that point, I went to my mom and dad, and I told them, hey, they were government workers. They're like, oh, you can't be in real estate. You got to get a job. And so I went to them, and I told them, I'm like, hey, look, I need to, this isn't working out. I've lost all the money that my family and friends trusted in me for the rehabs. I wasn't making income. And so anyways, my dad said something to me that I'll never forget, and that was basically, don't give up, get better, learn the market. This is where you grow. And so that's what I did. I was blessed at the time. I'd moved over to RE/MAX in Suburban. Tony McConkey, if anybody knows Tony. And we had a real estate appraiser in there. And at that time, it was just when the savings and loans kind of crashed, and they were licensing appraisers. So Gary was an interesting guy, and I said, okay, teach me how to do this so that I can do enough appraisals that will cover my expenses for my rehabs and everything. And so one thing led to another, and next thing you know, I got to the point where I had 16 appraisers. We were doing 500 deals a month. I never did an appraisal. All I did was take people out to happy hour, or I'd take them out on my cigarette boat and take them for crabs, and I would answer the phones all day long, but had everybody running the office doing everything. And then in 2008, everything changed with the crash. The private money that was coming in and giving everybody 1% interest only, you didn't have to qualify. Financing will drive the market. And then once all those programs went out, and everybody that had 2 or 3 homes and they were paying 1% interest on a 3-year note, and they had to refi, boom, everything blew up. And so that's when the federal government came in. President Obama had just come in, and they changed how lenders interact with appraisers. They blamed us. They said that we were wild childs and we were listening to the loan officers and giving them whatever value you wanted. When in reality, there just was no underwriting. They didn't care. It wasn't us. There was no underwriting. And so anyways, fast forward, that's completely changed the dynamics of our business, where now the lenders and loan officers aren't allowed to talk to the real estate agent, the appraiser, and there's got to be separation through a third portal. So it completely changed my business, where I went from having the big business all the way down to a solopreneur, if you will. And so based on that, and through my journey with doing rehabs and modulars and seeing everything on the back end, I've learned and I've watched what the top 1% do in each different vertical. And it all comes back to the same thing. What's the value? They have a system to do it. They don't get involved emotionally. Have you ever noticed that some of the top producers never really seem to be doing that much? They just got a team going. And it's because they get systems. And then they understand what financing program to go. And in today's market, if you're looking to build a portfolio, if you have an investor looking to build a portfolio, probably the toughest thing to do, banging your head against the wall, is trying to go out and get a Fannie Mae loan and qualifying by yourself. If you're an entity, the financing is so much easier. And why would that be? Why would it be? When you're an entity, they'll do the DSCR loans with the debt to service. They'll count the income even though it's not rented. They don't really look at you sometimes. Or if you're doing a rehab loan, if you're an entity and the loan and value is right, you're good. But why would they do that? And that's because there was a shift after the 2008 with all the foreclosures. The government slowed it down so that if you're an individual, you can literally fight and stay in your house for probably 2 or 3 years. If you're an entity, that's not the case. You miss one payment, 2 payments. If they want to move on you, they can move on you. And they got the asset is secured because it's going to be at a certain loan to value. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So before we get into going over, and everybody understands this last one here on the problem, TBB was to be built, or to be subject to, if you will. Anybody have any questions so far? Now, the goal of today was the first session before we have our yes.
One of the things that, like I said, was important to me anyway, was when you're doing the estimates as is and as complete, where you do certain things to get the higher value.
So you need to know both?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So the first session, I want to teach you the framework. And then the second session, and just remember this is a beta class, so anything that you have, if we need to take longer in the first session, that's fine. You know, we can go for what your needs are. If we get to the second session, you know, the idea is that anybody here can give me a property, and we'll all sign on the Zoom so that you can see it on your computer, and you can see me pull the comps and see how an appraiser would do it, or you know, someone has a system. If the technology doesn't work, sometimes it doesn't, this will be our first try. If it doesn't, we will reschedule another time where we can all get on by Zoom and we'll do it together. In addition to that, I do have 2 people that we're going to have 5 minutes hear from at the end. One of them is going to be Chris, and he's going to talk to us about AI. Specifically, I will interject with him on how you can use AI to position and communicate your property or your basis to an appraiser when they come so that you can frame it for them. Would everybody find that helpful?
Yes.
Okay. And then the second part is we have Tom Lizio coming in, who has a construction management company. So like if you have somebody who wants to add an addition or need to figure out repairs or whatever, he has the frameworks and tools that he can share with you as to how to go through and price something, what a kitchen may cost, what other things may cost. And so those are just going to be some short conversations, which I'm hoping, if everything goes well and if they're open to it, I'm hoping in the future that we can get them to do an additional workshop where we can come in and we can go in more depth and have some exercise for it. But we'll figure that out as we go. But the goal of today, again, is so that when you walk out here, you have a framework. All right. Before I give you the framework, it's very important that you understand the principles and the structure that we work in when it comes to financing. So up here at the very top is the King of Kings. These set the tone for everybody, and it's Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And then right under them would be HUD, VA, and then the banks. And then under them could be your community banks. And then under them is going to be your private money or hard money. So the way to look at it is, in the financing world, and when you're dealing with housing, there has to be pretty much one policy that addresses the whole country, right? So the same policies and programs that apply here apply in California, apply everywhere. And so they do this so that they have one set system. And that system sometimes can make sense, and sometimes it may not make sense if you have your right borrower. But there's nothing we can really do about that unless they're paying cash. If you want to get your deal funded, the lender is the one who sets the rules. So when the lender sets the rules up here, everybody else down here, all the brokers and everybody else, they're all originating things and they're turning around and they're selling it right here. They're not keeping it. They're making 1 or 2 points and some fees, and they're selling it up here. So knowing this system, because if they send up something that doesn't meet Fannie's standards, they're not going to buy the loan. Does that make sense? And so it's all about liquidity and getting things moving. Now, Fannie Mae sets the policy for how appraisals are done. And since they set the policy, everybody down lower will adopt the same guidelines, because in the case they have to sell it, they want to be able to liquidate the loan. Does that make sense? So the framework that we're going to teach you, one, I don't want to be able to say that you're going to be an appraiser. You're not. What I want to be able to say is that you're going to have enough knowledge that you're going to use the framework so that you'll be able to position and be able to decide whether you want to take this deal or how you want to educate your buyer seller. Does that make sense?
Quick, so is there exceptions to the framework? Are there exceptions to the framework that is produced by Fannie Mae?
Private, there is.
Yeah, private. Yeah.
What
They-
about community banks? Because I feel like sometimes they have a little bit more leeway than.
They do.
like
And
private.
so typically what will happen is the higher up you go, this is going to be your best mortgage product. Lowest rate, best terms. Okay? The more you deviate from that, the more you're getting into a portfolio or a different product. And they can write these programs that they do, mortgages, they'll write them for a specific type of property or buyer. Okay? So if you're dealing with a community bank that's doing reinvestment, and they're part of their mission with being bank federally insured is that they have to put a certain amount of money back into community development. They're going to create products that will help rehab within their community. So they can create a different set of standards because they're funding and holding that loan with the objective of they're either going to eventually take it out with a loan up here, or it's a note and they got to call it out at some point. Does that make sense? Right. So that's where knowing on the need, each one of these, when they come over, they're going to give the appraiser a different set of instructions. For the most part, the valuation part is the same, but where the difference may be, maybe if you're doing down here with private money and you got that second home or that shed that was converted into living area, up here, it's designed for a single borrower, a single family. They're not designing it that if you have a second or third family in there, if you have to rely on income, they're going to give you this best rate and term. You're going to fall down here into a different product and a different price point if it's a rental or an income property. Does that make sense? So understanding the framework, and this framework took me a little while to figure out when I was selling, and I figured it out on the back end because I see. Probably to date, I would say that I've been involved in over 100,000 appraisals just in Maryland. And when I say that, I mean all the people working for me through the years, when people used to be able to call me up and say, hey, Steve, what's this property worth? And I could pull comps and say, this is what it is. Loan officers, I could do it that way. So this is the basic framework, and this is how things are done as far as qualifying. So sometimes the people will say, hey, the appraiser, they suck. They didn't give me what I wanted. And sometimes it's not necessarily the appraiser, it's just we have to comply by the instructions of the assignment. And when we get assignment over, they got like 10 or 12 pages of what we got to do. So it's kind of crazy. Any questions so far? No? Okay, good. Now, this is what, yes?
So when you have your assignment, depending if it's a VA appraisal
FHA, conventional, whatever. But that is also, once you submit the appraisal back through your portal and it gets back to the lender, how often do you think when the underwriter has to then review it before they actually are supposed to reveal?
Yeah,
the
excellent question.
value?
So,
Do you feel like the underwriter is,
yeah, so here, a great question. And so after the 2008 crash, this is what Fannie did. They created what they call the data portal. So every time I send in the appraisal, they design the form and they design instructions. So every time any appraiser sends in the portal, sends it in to the lender, it goes right into Fannie's data portal. And Fannie's data portal can look at each comp, all the times that comp's been appraised, and they can look at my adjustments. They can look at if I say this has a deck and all the other 100 appraisers that use this as a comp through the year says it doesn't have a deck, I'm going to get a flag, and they're going to call me back and say, why are you saying that? You know, or if I say, you know, if there's something wrong there, it's going to be caught just like that. So what's happened now after 2008 is Fannie and Freddie have now also put pressure on the underwriters. The underwriters now have liability like an appraiser would if they don't, if they feel they're not underwriting deals and deals start going bad, they can make them liable. So what happens now, and the reality is, I can write a perfect appraisal, and I'm still going to get 2 or 3 callbacks for them to want me to document something. Because if I do 300 appraisals for a lender this year, and the underwriter, and they're all perfect, right? And the underwriter never sends a question back as to my thing, they're going to say, you never underwrote this appraisal. You never looked at it. You never reviewed it. So they're going to, so it's a great question. They're going to look at everything. But one of the reasons why it's beneficial for you to understand this is where Fannie Mae is going. Fannie Mae right now is in the process of developing a new form that will allow non-appraisers to go out and take a picture of a property, $25, right? And the reason why they can do this is now they have all the data on every house that's been selling and financing in their computer that they're going to the automated modules.
is that why then sometimes the loan officer will say, we don't even need an appraisal for this, we know, Fannie says they know what the
Yes.
value is? Okay.
Yeah. The biggest thing they can't tell is condition, right?
Yeah, how do they know?
That's the thing, condition. But if they don't need an appraisal, it's usually because of the loan to value. If the loan to value is low enough, you eliminate a lot of the risk, right? So the problems that you're typically going to have, and where they look at things harder, is the higher LTV. When you get into FHA and VA, and if that's your exit buyer for rehabs, this is what they've learned through the years. If a buyer only has 1 or 2 months of payment and savings, and they move into a house that needs a lot of work, the stove doesn't work, the roof is leaking, what's the most likely outcome? They can't repair it, so what are they going to do? They're going to get out. And when FHA is lending at close to 100%, once everything's factored in, there's not a lot of room there for error. And so they set very strict standards on condition and safety so that they're protecting their program, because remember, they're lending all across the country. And so they're lending in volume and protect the solvency of the assets. And what they're doing, they got to have a minimum baseline. So sometimes you may get a buyer that says, hey, houses here are worth 500, but over here, this house, because it's beat up, estate, needs a roof, everything, is selling for 250. And I got a buyer, but they got to do FHA. Are you an idiot to put a condition on this because the value's so good? And that's not the case. The case is all across, they have to use the same standard. It doesn't matter what value you're getting it at. The property has to meet the minimum standards of the program. So in a case over here, we get it below and it's in bad condition. This is where when you come down on the lower part of the chart, higher thing, those are the loan programs that will fund it very quickly and save you a lot of headaches. Does that make sense? Okay. Is this helpful so far? Okay. So now we get to the fun part. Has anybody heard or seen anything in the news about bias. Bias, as far as appraisal bias or lender bias, that, you know, you undervalued my property, or why is my property less in this county versus this county?
One in Baltimore, I think.
Yeah. So it's a big issue now where people are having bias. And the number one thing that the lender wants to do is, there's 3 different ways that you can appraise a property. One is the income approach, and the income approach is typically used on commercial properties. They get an income of the building, and then they do a cap rate based on the type of building it is. There's the cost approach, which is used more in big commercial dwellings, like, let's say, the dams in Louisiana, or, you know, a bridge. There's something much different that they would use a cost approach to do. But for residential, they do the direct sales approach, or the market activity. So when it comes to making adjustments or asking what's going on, everything designed with the appraisal and the appraiser and the process and Fannie Mae, they have one question: what does the market support for this property? Right? So if you have a property that you're listing for $500,000 that's split foyer, and you have other split foyers in the neighborhood that are $400,000 or $350,000, and they're all the same, they're going to look at what the market activity is doing. Does that make sense? Same thing, and right now we're just talking high-level principles, and we'll get a little more in depth as far as examples. But then the second part of that is, if you have a buyer or seller, and, you know, for us, we're pretty blessed because we're in some areas that are pretty well developed. We have a lot of density. You're typically going to find 3 price points within the market. Who wants to guess the top price point? It would be new.
Numbers?
I know, and what I'm talking about, usually there's going to be 3 different price points, and the price points are going to typically be based on condition. Assuming you have like models, you know, whether it's a colonial, right? So, yeah, so whatever you have, it's either going to be new or renovated. It's typically going to be your top price points. What would be the middle? Yeah, average. Yeah, some updates, not ours, so we'll say average. And then where would be the bottom? Yeah, yeah, yep. So, principally wise and tactic wise, if you're looking at a property and somebody says, hey, what improvements should I make? What we would do is we go and we look at we define the market area, and then we would look at the properties that are selling at the top price point and see what are the finishes on the inside. That tells you what the market's paying. That tells you what the market expectations are. If you have somebody that says, okay, everybody's doing Corian and stainless steel and blah, 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 but I want to do something really nice. I'm going to import Italian stuff, and I'm going to have all this stuff. And so the key point that you'll be able to tell your people is that Fannie Mae and all them underwriters are going to look at it and say, okay, if everybody else is spending 15 or 20 grand on their kitchens, and you want to go out and spend 80 or 100 grand, show me that there's other 80 and 100 grand quality kitchens out there in order for us to get the money. Now, does that mean, and remember, you're looking at this through the eyes of the lender, because you guys deal with 2. You have to deal with the eyes of the lender, and then you also got to deal with the eyes of the buyer. Could the eyes of a buyer see something here and say, oh, I would pay that? But then the lender may say no. And so that's why understanding these basic principles and how they do it will allow you to position and let them know this is what you have. The one thing that we're taught not to do, no matter what property you go into, You never want to go in there with your opinions. You go in there with a blank slate and you just look at the data, and then you let the market tell you what's going on. The market will talk to you if you go through the process and you look at the comps and you flip through the photos, or even if you want to drive through the neighborhood, you will get complete clarity on where the lender most likely is going to price this property. Now, in a market like today, you also have to assess, as we do, we have to assess the overall market direction. Is every part of the country right now still going up, or are some parts staying steady or going down? We're going up. There's other parts of the country that are going down. There's parts in the district, there's parts in Montgomery, there's parts in Northern Virginia, Prince George's, that are starting to go down. Why? Because of what's going on, maybe what's going on in all the change in DC. It's causing some hesitation with the market. In Arlington, you're seeing a stagnant and some going the other way. So it's important when you walk in that you also understand the overall market direction. Are you guys getting this? Make sense? Okay. Now, when I do an appraisal and you go out and you look and there's hardly any listings in the neighborhood, and the agent tells me we got 4 or 5 contracts and we had 14 showings in one day, what does that tell me? That tells me that the market's still going up, right? So you're going to have, what I found is that there's 2 parts to where you really set the tone for your deal. One is on the intake, and you're converting them to a signed deal. And then 2 is once you launch it, and you're starting to fulfill what you've been hired to, and you get offers in. This is where you need to apply the same thing that you're learning here on the front end and also on the back end with the offers that come in, so that you can best assess who is going to be the best deal to get you over based on the buyer, the cash they have, and the exit program that you're using. Does that make sense?
It does, but there's also a challenge there, like when you get multiple offers and it shows the demand for the property and they keep going up, up, up. Is there any key thing that, I've tried to understand, what does demand have any effect, if at all, on the value? Like, when we went to that stage where people were bidding $50,000 over the ask price and they were still appraising even though there wasn't any comps to support it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and we see it a lot. People are just paying cash over. And so we try and do, we try and assess it more. In an uptrending market like this, especially in the spring, our most difficult time of year is right now. Right now is the hardest time to appraise because we're having the biggest price jumps for the most. Here is a tip. Sometimes closing the quickest is the wrong thing to do, because if all the other contracts are under contract as well and they're being paid above, if you delay the settlement by a couple weeks sometimes, all those other settlements close, and guess what? They're closing higher than what the list price was. Now, I know there's and again, we're just looking at it from the eyes of making the lender happy, right? In that scenario, you also have to look at the eyes of the buyer and what happens if the buyer backs out or something else. I mean, you got things to weigh there. But as far as if you're looking at it through the lens of the lender, that's where it can make a difference.
What about if you have a house in a neighborhood and I'm gonna guess location, I'll say location, school district, stuff like that. You have an average price in that neighborhood, let's just say 600,000. Then you've got another one coming and it's in top condition, renovated, it's just really nice. But all your comps in this neighborhood were not. How far can you stretch out of that neighborhood? Because this house is top condition and renovated. So it really doesn't compare to the solds in there. They're, say they sold for 600, this one can sell for 800.
So it's actually an excellent question. What do you do when you have a property in a neighborhood that's been renovated and else isn't, what do you do in that case? So there's two things to keep in mind. One is the neighborhood, and two is the broader market. If you have somebody that you want to sell in this neighborhood and there's nothing for sale, when I was an agent, there would be a couple other neighborhoods that they would consider, right? And so that's the same thing that I would do, or an appraiser should do. Or if you're pricing your property, when you meet with the appraiser, you let them know, because of the condition, because of this, there's nothing in the neighborhood, we're going to the broader market. So what you would want to do is you would want to find another one that was renovated, and that's also a similar style and square foot home. And this is where we found it, and this is how we price it. And if anybody tells you that a renovated house will sell for at or won't sell for more than a non-renovated house, they're on crack. You know, it's just, that's not the market.
So I have that exact situation right now. I have a listing that is a split foyer in a neighborhood that a lot of split foyers sold for a max of like $650. My listing has an extra lot that conveys with the property that's on a completely different tax number. So, you know, if the buyer didn't want that, they could sell it. It's a subdivided lot, and it has a $120,000 3-car garage, and the whole house has been completely remodeled. The offers that I have received from these agents are all saying, well, the highest one in the neighborhood sold for $650. Well,
But we went outside the neighborhood.
correct. Like, look at what mine offers. Everything in the entire house has been redone. It's a beautiful house. $650 is not the value.
Right. So
Would you price it at $685?
So how far out in the?
So it's not that much different.
Not crazy.
It's not that much difference, but it's
They're
crazy.
not budging, they're not raising.
so the question is, how far can you go? Here's the answer.
And I don't and it's odd because it's a beautiful house in a water privileged neighborhood. I'm at wits, not my wits end about it.
Here, so the question is, how far can you go? And the answer is this. You're going to go wherever the typical buyer would go, right? And typically you'll know, they'll tell you, hey, if I'm looking in Crofton, these are neighborhoods in Crofton, and yeah, maybe I'll consider Millersville. You know, that's a little bit of a stretch, but you know, depending on the property and depending where it is, your next default is, what is the broader market? If I had to replace this unit and someone had to be in this market for this townhome or single family, what is the broader market and what are the conditions? And the more developed the areas you're in, the more density, townhomes, condos, cities, your broader market is going to be a little smaller than if you're in Calvert County and everybody's on, or Davidsonville and everybody's on 2 or 3 or 5 acre lots, or the Eastern Shore. Then it's going to be a little bit bigger because the market is paying for, and the biggest traction point, Calvert County, St. Mary's County, the point of buying down in those markets is people typically want space. They don't want to be crowded. And there's one road, main road in, one road out, and for most parts, even if you're 5 miles apart, you're only 5 minutes or 3 or 4 minutes from the main road. You know, there's one way in and out, so it would attract the same buyer. So that is a standard that you would use, is what is the replacement, or where would I sell somebody a similar home? Does that give you some clarity?
Yeah.
Linda? Huh?
Yeah, confirm my thought. I was thinking about that for one of my properties, and they're totally renovated, so I'm glad you broke that price down. This home is average.
Yeah.
The other one was totally renovated, and it's at a $35,000 increase from there, so.
Maybe you
Yeah,
could add
I do.
something like in the remarks, you know.
Well, I had it at 700 and I got no showings at 700.
Oh.
So I had to reduce it to 685.
So we,
just don't know the value.
so we see unique properties all the time. And here's what to remember about a unique property. And here's what to remember about a lender. A lender typically wants to be able to appraise a property so that they can move it within 90 days. If you have a unique property that has that, a big garage, all this other stuff, a unique property, depending on the individual buyer and the utility to that buyer, will see that as different value. if you have a mechanic in the market, and they can do work or a car show,
Got a lift, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a mechanic's dream.
or a car collector,
Right.
that utility is going,
Compressors, it comes with the whole
Right.
9 yards.
so that utility to that buyer will have a lot more value than to the buyer who doesn't do any car work,
Right.
right? And so the lender's going to say, show me, if you do get that buyer, show me, rather, when you do get that buyer, we'll say, show me other comps that have garages that I'm going to give the full value for it. Otherwise, when they take it back, they want to be able to move it. They don't want to have to wait for that one buyer. And the difficulty about unique properties, in a strong market, a lot of times unique properties will fly the highest. In a stable or declining market, sometimes it could take you a year or two to sell that. But you gotta, by understanding that when there's not a lot of market activity of a specific type of property, that's a red flag of we don't know when that one buyer's coming in because the buying pool is much reduced, right? Does that make sense? There's fewer people that would have utility. Huh?
Like an over-personalization issue, like it's customized, geared towards this one person, you just have to figure out how to market.
Yeah.
But then you have to prove the marketability to the lender, saying, if we have to resell this, is there a market for this home with this much personalization?
Right, and so they're, when you get into unique, the problem with unique is that that one buyer who really sees the utility and value of that may be in the market, they may not be in the market. They may be in the market 6 months from now. But when you get to the average buyer who doesn't really have a need and, I'd like it, but I'm not going to pay $150,000 more for it, because so when you do properties like that, it's just good to keep that in perspective. Now, here's what the market will tell you. If there was a big demand for that property with those features, they would be being built and built and built and built. If you don't see them, that means that, it's nice, but it's not demanded by your average buyer. And the market will talk to you like that.
How can I justify, right, so the 2 offers that they walked away because we couldn't come to an agreement, if they were to build that garage today, it would probably cost $160,000. I mean, we're talking a massive garage.
Right.
I understand that I'm not valuing it that, but how can I
Right.
justify to say, hey, listen, here's the difference price, which
Right.
isn't that much money in my opinion. You couldn't even build those features on the property for that.
Yeah.
Depends on how much that garage means to them.
Right, that's exactly right. Yeah,
You can sit
Demand,
there and say
unique-
brick and
unique
mortar.
property,
Yeah.
unique buyer.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Right.
Does it fall in the principle
take
like a stove is a stove? Like you can have a really nice, gorgeous stove that's not, over custom, and you can have the $500 special at Walmart and it's gonna appraise equal, you walk in the house and the appraiser says, okay, it has a stove.
It cooks.
And you're looking at this,
You better get more from Viking.
well, I'm not talking, you know what I
Yeah.
mean, I'm talking the smaller levels. But, you're looking at the garage and that's phenomenal, but a garage is a garage. So if I was trying to impress upon an appraiser the value of that, and you're in a marketable water area community, I would be looking at RV storage, I would be looking at boat storage, I would be selling it on those aspects and not so much the garage. Yes, you can do repairs, you have all this land.
And it has the ability to have an RV, a boat, it has a plug for the, it's got all that.
But I mean, I would go outside of the realm to find more waterfront homes that are using the storage for the boats, for the RVs, and then use them in my comps and my I don't know how many people do a presentation to an appraiser, but I always, before they cross the threshold of the house, I have a presentation with.
I make them sometimes on a tough property or when it's so really high, I get lobster and buffets, happy hours. Woo, yeah, give me the tough properties, baby. Denise takes me on a boat cruise and gets me drunk, you know what I mean? So, hey, just sign right there, Steve. Yeah.
So what if you have a property that's in a neighborhood, and again, let's just say the average is 600,000. The 600,000 houses, some of them were rental, some of them hadn't been updated in 30 years. Then you've got another home that's been updated, not recently, but maintained in very good condition. Maybe they've replaced the roof, the air conditioning, all of that. So I've got this house that obviously should sell higher, then how does an appraiser know, okay, this one's sold at 600, but the condition of this property, if you never walked in it, I mean, you can go online, look at pictures, but sometimes pictures can really be deceiving. But,
They can?
so how, you as an appraiser, it's like, okay, well, they priced this house at 750, the last one sold for 650, but the one that sold for 650 was not in good condition, it was a rental for years. How do you offset that?
Okay. So one of the ways, if I'm not, so as an agent, when you go through and you price your property and you're looking at the market data, you're reading the data and you're making conclusions. So anything that you do there, and we'll show you how to do this with AI, how you can do it and prepare a package for appraiser. But when you go through and you come up with your theory as to how you're pricing it, it's very important that you also capture that data and you can give that to the appraiser. Hey, I looked at this comp, I talked to this agent, this is what they said, boom, 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 boom. And so that way it gives us stuff. If you don't do that, then what I would do, and this is me, this doesn't mean it's everybody, or it could be an automated evaluation, I would call and I look through the photos and I read the comments and I call, because my objective is to get it right. I want to make sure I get it right. That's all I want to do, get it right. And reflective of today, the value is for today. So the more that you give and the more that you communicate on your process and your thinking and how you did it to the appraiser, it just helps tell your story. And by being able to understand and differentiate the different price points and conditions, if for some reason it ever came back low, you're going to need to be able to have stuff like that give to the lender to say, this is why I want to appeal it, and this is why I think that they put the weight on the wrong comps.
How often do lender appeals go through?
They do. Hey, oh, well, wait a second. Jessica,
Yes.
tell your story.
No, about Ocean City?
Yeah.
Okay, so I couldn't have got there without Steve, I'm just gonna be honest with you. This was the most difficult transaction of my entire career. It was a lot. So I represented the buyer, and help me explain this one. So this property was a very unique property. It had a separate building in the back that was used as a rental. In my eyes, I felt like that was such a benefit because the buyer is going to live in the property, they're gonna rent the property, right? So that's gonna be income. Steve explained to me that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Steve explained to me that a lender doesn't like that. A lender isn't going to look at a property as they're going to rent the separate building and use that as a rental income, which didn't make sense to me. So we had the first appraisal came in, property was listed at $695. We were under contract for $695. First appraiser came in at $695. When it went through the underwriting, they denied it and they wanted to reduce it to $425.
Oh my God.
Jessica was right.
But
I did. Good thing we were in the same room. She'd have slugged me.
You want to talk about, I'm like, is this a typo? You got to be kidding me. You know how difficult, right? So we switched lenders. It was a bank statement loan. And went to another lender and said, is there any way that you can accept the first appraisal? Because this 424, I don't even know if he was in the right neighborhood. I mean, it made no sense. So Steve and I spent an hour and a half on Zoom going through all of this, and that, I'm gonna tell you, that email is going to forever be the best email of my entire career.
I'm still waiting for happy hour on that, by the way. No, I'm kidding. She's in Indian Rocks in Florida, and here I am still working. I'm like, come on. Right?
So Steve helped me write an amazing email that explained why you couldn't, because the appraiser kept saying, it has to be a comp within a 1 mile radius. There is nothing. This is literally a unicorn. There was no property that was similar to that within 1 mile. You had to go 3.5 miles out. And if you went 3.5 miles out, there was 4 other ones that you could use. But when they reduced it to 424, they're like, we're giving no value to that separate building. No value. I'm like, how could you not give a value? It's a house. It's literally a house.
Could be an in-law apartment.
Yeah, so,
What were the basis of, what were the facts?
so can I fill them in on the facts?
Sure.
Okay,
Since it's your class.
so, I want,
Why don't you?
I want, so I'll fill you in the facts, and then we'll take a quick break, and then we'll get into how to do things. But, so, first off, Jessica had a unique property because anybody that has, everybody been to Ocean City? So, Ocean City has the mainland over here, and then there's the bridge, and here's West OC. And then out here is Berlin and some other stuff. But anyway, she had a nice rambler right here in West OC, very close to the bridge, coming here. And and so there were two problems. One problem is that the square footage of the house and the tax records included the back property. So the lenders,
Was like 750.
yeah, so instead of being like 1,800 or 1,900, it brought it down to 1,100 or something like that.
Right.
Big difference. Instead of having, 2 or 3, having the extra bath and kitchen, it was reduced here. So it changed the price point. But in addition to that, it was the financing program. The financing program they were using was a stated loan. But in addition to a stated loan, it was probably the highest LTV stated loan that there was. Meaning they put the less amount down. So in that case, they got odd property, things weren't matching, and on a lot of stated loans, you have twice the down payment. So the lender would have more cushion. So that's where they really had angst with this. But where the difference is that in Ocean City, everything is like, condos, this, and there's only a few small sections where there's single families. And one of the sections is in North Ocean City. I have a place right by Harpoon Hannah, so I knew the neighborhood well. If someone's looking in the broader Ocean City market for a sale and they want a rambler to live in or a colonial, it's going to be like up here in Cane Woods. You may find a few sprinkled in down here, but otherwise, as you go down all the different things, they're townhomes or condos, and West OC. So anybody looking in the market, even though there wasn't anything that was for sale right here, because this was kind of like by where the outlets were as you came over 50, you would have to go way down towards Azteec or up here. So the market area for this is really these two markets right here. And so what we were able to do is we were able to explain the broader market, explain as you're close to them all the commercial and all that, and then explain to them that anybody looking would be looking here, and these were closer in square footage without the additional thing.
Right, because the first lender the first appraiser was looking at that when they assigned a second appraisal. And the second appraisal then, when the underwriter said that, then the second appraisal came in for the 424. I'm like, that guy's not even right neighborhood. But they wouldn't look at the additional area. So when Steve and I I didn't sleep for 2 weeks, spent a lot of time going through all of this and preparing this very, very detailed email. And my client switched lenders. With the email and with the comps that Steve helped provide, that new lender didn't even have their own appraiser. They just took this information and we closed for $695.
Is it a local lender?
Yes.
So ultimately, why did they
The bank
not
statement
count
lender.
the other? Structure,
Yeah,
Well, ultimately, what is their justification
We're not
for that? I mean, they just called it an outbuilding, or like?
yeah, they give it some value, but they're not going to give it the full value. So, well, basically, if you have 1,100 square foot home, Rambler, it's typically going to be at 18 or 2,000 or 2,200 square foot Rambler is going to be a much higher priced property than this. And so what happens, and we'll go into this after the break, where they put all their weight. They put all their weight on the main part of the building, the main unit that you live in, and everything else. Unless if there's market activity, they're not going to give you the full amount because they want it for a single family and they don't want you to count on the income.
Which didn't make sense to me, 100%, because even at the $695, when it went through, it almost cut out of it.
Yeah, and
I'm like, doesn't even make sense to me.
and it,
What about if the buyer was not trying to show that they were gonna use that as income?
My client was not showing
Well,
that.
then why should it matter?
well,
Trying to show they're gonna use
okay.
it for income.
So-
My client wasn't
So here's where it matters. The lender who came up with this unique program, I mean, they were aggressive on the street with this stated income loan, right? They have to create guidelines that they're going to apply across the whole country. And the stated loan program there is for a primary buyer. It's not for a primary buyer that can also get rental income out of it. So it's not that it doesn't make sense that there isn't value there. It's just the loan program that you're putting on it necessarily isn't structured or allowed to give it value like that. Now, could you possibly looked at another loan program where if he was buying in the LLC and he could count that income, you would have flown right through real quick. But what would have been different? Your rate and term, right? So when you're balancing and looking at contracts, always remember the chart that we had with Fannie on down. The lower down you get, they're loosening up to, okay, if it's got a second unit, we're going to do, okay, if you got a garage and he can make $3,000 a month on that beautiful garage, but guess what? You got to put more down payment and your rate's going to be higher because there's more risk with it, right? Everything's balanced towards the risk.
With more common sense.
Yeah, and it's not saying that there isn't value there. It's just saying that when they design these loans and they're designed for a specific buyer to get somebody in the house, they have to set the guideline. And if they make a variation here and they don't do it over here, now guess what they just got hit with? Discrimination. If the federal housing come in and look at their portfolio and say, well, who are you lending to or not? Why did you make an exception here but you didn't over here? You see what I mean?
Does the lender have, sorry to interrupt, does the lender have any, can they say, all right, this property's in Ocean City. I want an appraiser that is familiar with the area. Is there a criteria that appraisers have to submit to lender to say, okay, I'm qualified in this market? Because if you're in Ocean City, you may not be familiar with West Virginia. I guess, do you see what I'm saying? Or
Yeah.
maybe in the state?
Yeah.
Ocean City or Calvert County. It's
Yeah,
just a different market.
when lenders will sign you up, they'll ask what coverage area, and that's where there is a difference in the lenders who you choose to work with. There's a lot of local lenders that will have their own in-house underwriting. They'll fund it, and they have their own appraiser panel. There's other lenders who maybe aren't as specialized for the local market, boutique lenders, that are your big national lenders like Bank of America or Wells Fargo. Those loan officers, a lot of them get paid, and they get very low commission. They get lots of deals come to them.
Which is
You
why
know,
we switched
they
the
don't-
program. We switched lenders because I thought 424, you gotta be kidding me.
Yeah.
So we switched to a completely different broker, same program, and closed in 12 days, and they didn't even do their own appraisal. They just accepted the information that we provided.
Were you the buyer's agent or the seller?
I was the buyer's agent.
All right.
But the listing agent and I worked very closely to get the deal closed. Yeah, I
But
was the buyer's
anybody
agent.
can say they cover an area, I can say.
Realtors do it all the
I'll
time.
sell-
Right.
I sell in Allegheny County, that doesn't mean I know anything about it.
Well, so here's the thing. Here's the thing with appraisers, and I would imagine something similar to you. We have Congress created what they call universal standards practice of appraiser that we have to go by, and basically what it says is that you have to be competent or become competent when you go into a market. And if you use a system, what we're going to show you, for most properties, you'll be able to go through and apply the work if you're willing to put in a day or so or two to go through, make the calls and learn it. You can become very competent in the market. Now, if I'm not competent and it's outside of my scope of work, and I get that here, I will tell them I'm not competent to do this. I had one last week. It was a massive house. It was like 8,000 or 9,000 square foot, and there wasn't even anything close to it. There wasn't even any sales close. And I'm like, I don't know how to appraise this, so I can't write this to meet your standards, so I can't do it. And so there's times where.
Remember Danny's, my brother?
Yes. Yeah, like I said.
And you're not the only one, when there's real unique properties.
Look, I love unique properties, but I love even more ones that are very uniform, like townhomes and condos. So, you know, those buoy on slab.
I have a question. So I had one last year, and I'm on the buyer's end, so it worked out for me. But on the listing end, you want to be aware of this before you actually list the property. And this was a change in the appraisal rules from maybe a year ago or so. This was a semi-attached, or what do you call that?
Duplex?
Duplex property. And for some reason, right in the middle of this transaction, I guess, the appraisal rules changed with respect to this particular type of duplex. Maybe because it had like step down.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not sure quite why. But
So-
it was a big difference. It was like $50,000.
Yeah.
In an appraisal. How would we become aware of that before we list the property, of any rules and?
You call Steve McAdams, he'll tell you now. So
It's a big swing for that
it
price
is.
point.
And so we're getting ready, what you're about to discover after break is we're gonna show you the number one mistake and then the number one issue that calls off properties and what you can do when you bring it in and out. And it's gonna tie exactly to what you're asking. But before we take a 5 or 10 minute break, if we could just go around the room for 30 seconds and let me know if you learned anything out of the first session. Did you get anything out of this, Joe? Or any thoughts?
Yeah, you know, all of this, you know, even if it's just review, it's not maybe cutting edge new information I didn't have before. It's like, oh yeah, that's right, that's right. And it often reinforces what you already know. You know,
Thanks.
it confirms, yeah, that's
How
that's
about-
right. I think, yeah.
How about you, Ray?
I learned a whole lot.
Really?
With regards to unique property, talked to me about my property in DC, so I was able to get that perspective, but also about the pricing.
About the pricing points? Yeah, okay, great. Jessica?
Absolutely. I think there's, you know, different talking points that we may not have necessarily heard phrased that way, so of course.
And I'd like you to flip back to this page, is the levels of the levels.
The lender, yep.
That was eye-opening to me, and the price points.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
That was nothing but.
You know, oh, did I pass it? Oh. You know, I've had a relationship with Brenda since we graduated from high school. And Brenda has always said, Steve, you gotta listen to me. Did you get anything out of me today? Yeah, this will be-
I always do.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yes, no, I did get a lot. And just a reminder of, you know, even as simple as just, you know, focusing on when you get multiple offers, you know. I mean, I hate to say, you know, conventional, 20% down, that's the way to go. I mean, just going over the different scenarios on the types of loans with your
Great.
seller and the big one, going outside the area, which, you know, we have to do in Calvert. We do that often, because it is very different in the different
Yeah.
subdivisions. No, I always learn
And
from you,
it,
Steve.
and it always comes down to the buyer. You know, if there's nothing in this neighborhood, if I show them something they really want to buy in this neighborhood and they need to move, and I say, okay, well, would you consider this neighborhood or that neighborhood? And they'll usually tell you. The market will talk to you. Your clients will talk to you. And that's the whole thing. It's not rocket science. It's just telling the lender what's going on, telling the appraiser what's going on. Because it's my job to convey that to them. If someone says, hey, I want to sell my home, what should I do? What improvements should I do? Never say, this is what I think. Just say, let's see what the market's doing. Let's look at the comps, you know, so you don't over-improve it. Hey, what colors? If I got purple and yellow rooms and everything else, I want to go, what colors are selling? It's so easy. Just go to the renovated homes and look, see what colors they're using. They're flying off the market. The market talks to you.
Yeah, I think the point about, you know, when you're looking at the renovated homes in the non-renovated neighborhood and going back to the new construction, I think that was a good point for me. I don't, you know, if I have 2000, you know, year built versus, and then now, you know, going back to the 2025s to start comparing those when you can't find a renovated
Yeah.
home in the neighborhood. I think that's something to try.
For me, it's more of connecting the dots. A lot of it I know or knew and maybe in the back of my mind. And that a lot of these reasons why, of the why, is all because of lender,
Yeah.
Fannie, Freddie government stipulations and requirements, so that you can go back to your seller a lot of times, like, look, unless we're getting a cash buyer,
Yeah.
I don't make up the comps, I don't make up the government stipulations for what they call value, so it's a good
Yeah. And
contention with them.
the key thing to tell your sellers, I get that all the time, is that, look, FHA, VA, high loan to value, when you get grant loans, they're all designed to get people, they want to increase home ownership and they want to help people who have the hardest thing. But also, you have to make sure that you secure the solvency of the program and all the people you're asking to put money into it, all the pension funds and everything else, that there's a secure, stable, systemized process so that, it's okay for you, but not you. And then everybody gets sued and start losing their income and assets. And when they sell these and they go out there, especially when they're trying to give you the best terms, least amount of money down, lowest payment, it's a risk factor. So they say, okay, the buyer has to qualify solely on their own, no rental income. We don't want people getting here relying on rentals, because what happens if the rental people don't pay or get speed up, right? So that's the weighing of it. Diana.
Okay, so you just gave me anxiety.
I did?
Because yes, with this explanation, just like Denise said, that we're connecting the dots, probably information that we already had and we didn't visualize it that way. So now we have a way to explain the reasons why. But that's all about us trying to explain our seller, for example, right? And to reason with them. How do I not get there? Because at the end of the day, as a professional, I want to be equipped so that my pricing is right, not just have, good semantics and good
Yeah.
to explain.
And
We went to broader market, yes, because of,
and we're going to show you,
but I'm still,
we're going-
I'm feeling a little more anxious right now.
Yeah, so this right here is what we've gone over is the principles and the framework in which the lending market works. So this will help you if you don't understand this, it'll be harder to understand the next part, okay? So we're going to address that very quickly in the very next phase of this. But in the meantime, this is where I'm at. Now, as far as these principles goes, here's the thing to understand. When I talk to agents in Florida now, go down there, or when I was in Wyoming, or each market's different. Some markets are going down. They can't sell the properties. So
It's not, it's a little difficult to be at the expense of the buyer that we're gonna get. And we cannot control that, and I should be able.
right. So here's what I was just trying to say is that you deal with a couple different lenses. You deal with one, what's the bank going to give most likely on this property? What's the maximum they're going to lend or a position? And then second, you got to deal with the seller, right, and their expectations. So sometimes you may know that it may be X, but you also may know that you're in the spring market and the market's going up and there's no inventory and the market's going crazy and everybody else and it's going to sell for more. So now all you need to do is prepare your seller is that we don't know what the market's going to do. We know these are the last values and we know that the market's gotten stronger. So we're going to put it out there and then I'm going to have to try and manage the deal when we get offers in. Does that give you more anxiety? No? All right. Good.
No, I'm getting, I think what this class is about is that you're teaching us some guidelines, how the lenders would pretty much appraise it, so that if we follow through that,
Yes.
once we see the property and
Yes.
we're gonna look at certain characteristics that you're gonna teach us today,
Yes.
so that we can base that on, probably given the condition of the market, and if we get this type of buyer, we might get this, and this is why I'm pricing it
Yes.
at this point.
Excellent.
Because of these other market conditions.
Yeah, excellent point. So the point of this the point of this is exactly that the lender will look at it, and depending on the loan program, the down payment, and whether it's an individual or entity, condition of property, will determine what type of buyer and what type of financing they're putting on it. That will give you a clue as to the difficulty of trying to get this to settlement or not.
Try reaching out to your favorite lending partner too. Have a nice long lunch with your lending partner and pick the lending partner's brain. I go on a lot of listening appointments, and don't say much until the end, because most sellers are buying, so they're very soon going to be on the other side, and it's sometimes easy to say, yeah, well, that's what you're looking for is going to be a unique buyer for this reason, because of the lending criteria, which the seller's probably not expecting to hear that in a listing presentation. But,
That's
you know,
interesting, you go and listen to them.
I never thought of that.
sure. I mean, the tie-in with, loan guidelines, and they're realistic. Plus, I'm a third party.
Right.
You're the listing agent, so
Right.
you're driving the bus.
Yeah.
But you're giving a more objective.
Well, he's got
Point
enough
of
in the
view,
game,
yeah,
he's not
right,
making any
exactly.
commission on the
He's
sale of
unbiased.
that,
Right.
likely.
Right.
Katie?
Do DSCR loans?
Oh, yeah.
I just did one of those, that was a learning experience. And I liked it, I
Yeah,
thought, I
there's
wish I
about-
knew this like 20 years ago.
I know.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Great.
LLC.
Katie?
So I guess I would say, I mean, I comprehend what you mean by he's just reiterating knowledge that we already have, and that's true, but when you drive down the same path on a dirt road, you get new drugs. I had a lady who wanted to list a home in Chelsea Beach, her husband passed away, and she dumped like $250,000 into a split foyer with marble and maple and red oak and the verbiage, I took my broker, unfortunately, my old broker with me, and he said, well, it's still a split foyer in Chelsea Beach, you're not gonna get more than this. What I take from you is the verbiage that I totally intend on plagiarizing you with my listing.
Please?
The verbiage that I can convey to these people and try to take their emotion out of it, their emotional attachment to the home, and say, this is great, I love that you've done that, but this lender's looking at the marketability, can I find it in the general area? If this loan gets defaulted on, will it sell again? Will there be a market for the amenities in it, and will it be at the price point that you wanna sell it for?
Yeah.
And the verbiage, I think, is an extremely valuable thing that I take from this.
So here's one thing you never want to tell a seller. Never tell them that you can never get this price. Because what you're really telling them is, unless if you have a cash buyer that's willing to pay whatever, 99% of the market, could be in your thing, the funding mechanism that gets you the cash you want to move is going to be through a lender. And therefore, if that's our buyer and that's our funding mechanism to get our money, we have to play by their rules, and this is what you can expect. We can also shoot a market for someone that's paying cash, or you could just wait for a cash buyer, but who knows how long that would take. So never say never, and make sure you frame it in the context that what is the mechanism that's going to give you your cash and close the deal. If they don't have cash and they got to get a loan, then that's where you phrase, this is where you're most likely going to be. Now, in this market, does that also mean that you can't get a higher price? If you get a buyer that has cash and is willing to pay above the appraisal, that's very possible too. But these are different scenarios where once you understand the framework of the lenders and how they think in their programs that they're designed for and what they look for, you're going to be able to manage it and be able to say, look, there's a probability that we're going to get somebody that's going to pay above. That could be a very big probable. There's probability we may not. There's probability we get this, but we won't know until we test the market and we get the contracts. And then I can assess them and tell you which one we have. If we get someone that's going to buy at the very high point and they're getting 100% financing, that's most likely going to be a problem, but we can try it and we can see how far the appraisal will go. But by giving you the tools and knowing how the lender looks at the property, and they also look at the buyer, their qualifications, but then that'll help you balance everything and be able to control control your sellers or set their expectations, if you will. Does that make sense? Yeah? All right. Mary?
Again, my pool of buyers is in that average range, it's, 500 to 800, so I mean, that's the ones that are gonna typically get loans. So yeah, depending on the loan type, then.
And that's in your market, that's a very competitive, so chances are, they're most likely going to have to pay a little more than what the bank will lend on it, right? In some cases. Yeah, yeah, if they have it, but.
But yeah, I agree, because I've had contracts where I've looked at sellers and like, there's no way that's gonna fly, they don't have the cash to offset the difference in the price.
By the way, I've also gotten yelled at where people will write way over, and then I have it come in way over, and then I get, what the heck's wrong with you, Steve? That should come in lower. They want it to come in less. Yep. I'm like, what are you talking about? Sometimes, no matter what we do, we get beat up, right?
That's true.
Patty?
Yeah, this was like very helpful. It's kind of like what everybody else said. It kind of reiterates some of the things we know, but we forgot we knew, and then kind of connects the dots. And I do like some of the language you use that I will also be using.
Okay.
I like that, let the market speak to you.
The market talks.
Yeah.
The market talks.
Yeah. Instead of it saying it's me.
And
Even though it,
Right, listen to the market.
right.
and the number one thing before you do anything, and you guys all know it from being active, what market are we in today? What market that we're in today, an agent in Arlington or an agent in Potomac or an agent in Tampa may say something different, right? But what market are you in, and where are you working? An agent in Hagerstown may say something different than an agent elsewhere. So it all starts with what market you're in. And then you look at how does it look at, and then in a market where things are increasing, you gotta say it's increasing, and we won't know exactly until we get all the buyers and know where we're going to land on your price, right? Linda's another one. She always tells me, I never get to tell her. So how'd you do?
I think keeping mindful of when you have a listing to put yourself in the shoes of the lender so that
Yeah.
you know all the things that we talked about.
Yeah. And that's the thing, you wear several hats, and you're kind of like, the ones who really crush in all their sides, they just look at it like they're managing, they're a facilitator. They're looking at, okay, here's the odds for this, let's see what happens. And you let the market and activity tell them, and that's where it goes, and they remove themselves from, the one thing you don't want to do, and I used to do that when I was agent, if I used to say it, we're going to get this, and everything's okay, I used to felt responsible, like I had to get that, and I would get angst in me, and everything else, and you can't do that. You just got to say, this is what the market's saying, and the market could be changing before us. We don't know, but we'll see once it's live. All right, let's take a quick break.